What's your, "'tis but a scratch," moment? When I was very young I pulled a tablecloth and managed to dump a freshly boiled pot of tea all over myself. I get rushed to hospital. My skin is red and bubbling. I should be in floods of tears. Instead, I proudly point to my ruined skin and proclaim to the paramedic, "I did that." Over 30 years later and I still have some scars, but I am definitely no longer that hardcore. I am a bartender in a nightclub. One night while working I was pouring a drink while I reached back with my other hand to open a fridge, and that's when I heard a pop, and got a huge pain in my back shoulder area. The pain was pretty bad, but I was sure it was a pulled muscle and there wouldn't be much point in seeing a doctor other than getting meds. So I waited. Fought through the pain which was so bad at times it was making it hard to breathe. That was a Friday. I called off Saturday and had Sunday, Monday, Tuesday off before I went back to work Wednesday, once I biked into work. In all I waited 9 days total before finally deciding to go to the ER. I had a collapsed lung. Called a spontaneous pneumothorax. 20 minutes after getting to the ER I was put into emergency surgery. I was essentially breathing with only one lung, and any major impact to my chest would have collapsed the other and probably killed me. I walked under a pine tree barefoot and stepped on something that mildly hurt. Went back inside and was cleaning my bathroom when I looked in the mirror and saw whole bloody footprints covering the floor behind me in a line down the hall. For a minute I thought I was being haunted or something. A field arrow went through part of my thumb. Absolutely shattered my wrist. Pulverized a couple carpals into dust. Fractured my scaphoid bone and flipped it 180 degrees. Spent 2 days trying to convince myself it was but a simple sprain. When I finally went to a doctor they rushed me into emergency surgery. Later found out the doctors couldn't believe I wasn't incapacitated by pain. Whoops. I ran into the top of a door frame, did the whole cartoon head outside, legs flying inside and then falling on my back. Head hurt a tiny bit so I covered my forehead with my hand with some pressure for a minute. When I removed my hand and tried to get up, my friends who were crowded over me collectively gasped. Turns out I had split my forehead skin open and they could see the bone. I literally wouldn't have known if they hadn't been so freaked out. Couldn't feel a thing. Got 5 stitches and a small scar near my hairline. Broke wrist while snowboarding. Stuffed some snow in my glove and did a couple more runs. I got hit by a car while riding my bicycle, flew through the air, bounced off his windshield breaking his windshield, my helmet and 2 vertebrae. Then thrown to the ground where my kneecap shattered and bone was sticking out of the skin. And as I lay there in shock, unaware of how badly I was injured, I thought, I might be able to get back on my bike and ride home. I actually got stabbed 1 time in my lower thigh. Walked to the hospital with my coat covering it 'cause I didn't wanna freak out any kids, all thanks to the wonderful thing called alcohol. Stung like a bitch the next day though. I got into a car accident and showed up to practice an hour or so later. I broke my neck on a huge shorebreak wave and didn't want to leave the beach, so I continued swimming and playing volleyball until my friends noticed my neck was swelling up bigger than my head. A couple weeks ago, I stepped on an ant hill and got a bunch of ant bites on my ankles. 3 to 4 days later, the itching was unbearable. I wasn't sleeping, my legs were swollen, and no amount of Benadryl or antihistamine cream was helping the itching. I finally went to a clinic to get a shot or whatever, because I clearly having some sort of allergic reaction. It was a staph infection that had spread from my ankles up to my knees. I would have died if this 1920 instead of 2020. I was on antibiotics for 10 days, and now several weeks later, the dead skin from the infection is still flaking off. TLDR. Scratched ant bites with unclean hands and gave myself a staph infection. Ignored it for several days because it was just some bug bites. When I fell through a window and cut my stomach open, my colon and stomach both fell out of my body while I caught and looked up at my friends bleeding out. Was in shock, but alas, 'tis but a scratch. Still here today, hooray. Not me but my teacher. She said that one time when she was in college she was in a classroom and her foot was stuck on something but she just yanked back and was fine, but she was looking up the whole time. She got to her dorm and took of her shoe and it was soaked in blood and her foot was stabbed by a loose piece of metal. Got blackout drunk while camping and fell hands first onto the grate that had been over the fire for hours. My wife and friends were all freaking out thinking I definitely had third-degree burns. I came out of my blackout in the bathroom with all of them trying to wash my hands in cold water. When all the soot came off, I was somehow completely unharmed. Since then I've been known as the unburned. My little sister fell down about 15 steps at our grandma's house when she was a toddler. She got up, giggled and went to go eat some snacks. This other time, still a toddler, she was supposed to be napping. We were in the living room and heard a huge thud. We ran to the room thinking she'd fell out of the bed. Nope. She somehow managed to pull the TV down. This was the early 2000s, TVs were heavy AF, and it fell on top of her. She was laying there in snow angel position and my mom freaked out. When we got the TV off her, she got up and asked for ice. Not to soothe pain but to eat. My little sister was in still as a champ. Separated 2 ribs when I slipped going up a staircase. I went down to radiology at work and got an x-ray, looked at it and said okay no breaks and just walked over to the and got 2 big rolls of ACE bandages. Went back to my desk and took off my shirt and t-shirt. Boss walks in and sees the bruises on my chest. Then I said no biggie just don't make me laugh, told him what happened, wrapped myself up and went on with life. Fell off my bike and dislocated my shoulder, popped it back in and kept on going. Trapped a nerve but it's okay 90% of the time now. Another time I fell in some glass, pulled out most of it from my hands and pulled out a piece approximately 9 days after the wound had fully healed. I felt a weird pressure when I'd hold things so I had to feel around and cut the glass out. Fell off my bike and into some wet gravel when I was 8. No big deal, scraped my knee and got soaked. Played the rest of the day outside and came home for dinner. Went to use the bathroom and when I pulled my jeans off I realized I wasn't soaked from the puddle, it was blood. I had sliced a huge gash in my knee and when I pulled my pants down a flap of skin pulled away and it started bleeding again. My first stitches. Edit. Lovely, my all-time top comment on Reddit is about a skin flap. Thanks a bunch. I broke my arm at the skating rink, and skated for an hour before I even left. Then, after I left there, I went to a playground with my BF at the time and hung out. I didn't go to the hospital until the next day. Broke my tailbone and didn't know for 6 months. Edit. To answer some questions, found out when I got an x-ray. I've always had moderate back pain, but I also have a high pain tolerance. It's the only bone I've ever broken. I was 14 I think. It was freshman year of high school. Some of y'all need Jesus. I was a kid visiting family in West Virginia and was playing with some other kids which somehow involved me being in a tree. I got a little cut on my hand and was inconsolable. Ran to the house for my mom to make it better. She put the smallest of band-aids on it. When I turned around and started walking out of the house she started yelling and I was just looked at her like, what? There was a trail of blood coming from the back of my leg. Didn't even notice. I broke my toe running up the stairs and I ran back down the stair thinking I just stubbed it until my toe turned purple. When I was younger, like really young, I had escaped from the house and at the time my dad was just about to drive to work. I had managed to get just behind the wheel of the car and got ran over, got rushed to hospital and at around midnight parents got a call from hospital because I was running around the place like a lunatic waking all the other kids up and basically I got away with a car tire mark and that's it. TLDR. I was a super baby who got ran over and didn't break a single thing. When I was a small dumbass child, I had a habit of gripping door frames when walking through the door. I did not discriminate between the latch side or the hinge side. Door gets closed and my fingers get crushed in the hinge, to the point where there's a dark purple line across them and a tangible groove. My mom starts completely freaking out over the injury, but I, brave little dumbass I was, saw the distress she was in at what had happened. I put on my bravest face, my eyes welling up in tears from the pain, and said, "Don't worry mommy, it'll heal." I was right, it did, but still. Edit. Good lord my inbox. Thanks for the guilds guys, I'm glad you enjoyed my story. When I was 6, I badly bruised my arm when performing cartwheels and backflips and at first when I fell it was no big deal until my arm was swollen and I couldn't bend it. Had to wear a cast for a few weeks. My first job was as a butcher and I came into work one day with a raging hangover. I sharpened the knives, they were crap ones that went blunt all the time, and immediately proceeded to cut my finger open. I thought nothing of it, went about my shift, and when I got home to put a proper dressing on it I found out it was as deep as the bone and I wouldn't get feeling back in the end of it for literally years. My mate in high school broke my nose in class and the teacher told me to be quiet. I got hit by a car my freshman year of high school. I went flying, lost consciousness for a split second when I hit the ground, thank God for helmet. When I came to, people were all around me asking if I was okay, and what happened, etc. I was like, oh yay, I'm good. I'm gonna just get back on my bike and go now. But didn't really move. Then people started asking me to call an ambulance and my mom, etc. I was like, why? I'm good. I even told my mom on the phone I was still gonna bike home. But as I was saying that, the people around me had started to move one of my legs and I watched as my foot proceeded to not move. I had broken both bones in my leg completely in half and part of ankle. Just pure adrenaline and shock. I also vividly remember thinking, this is what it feels like to get hit by a car. Also, the leg wasn't setting right, probably from movement, and the doctor decided to put me on laughing gas as he tried to crack my bones back into place. Was in a stupor laughing as I felt my bones grind. When I was a child I was pretty stupid, so I was playing, don't let the paper touch the ground. It's where you just keep hitting a piece of paper in the air. Then I ran into my kitchen while playing and smashed my head onto the corner of a table and it was gushing blood. I didn't even notice my head cut open right in the middle of both my eyes. I'm very lucky I still have vision, and I only realized my head was cut open when my sister looked at me and just started screaming her vocal cords out. One of my students. I had impressed upon them that there would be no late work unless hooked up to tubes in the hospital. It was their research paper final, pre-digital submission days. College freshmen had been given a ridiculously fast car by parents who'd also chosen a ridiculous acid green color. His car stood out. Another kid in class sees on his way to class said ridiculous car smashed in ambulance at side of road. He stops and approaches. Child owner of ridiculous car is being loaded into ambulance on stretcher and sees other student. Yells, my research paper. Front seat. Get it to her. He did so and submitted the blood-smudged, bedraggled document. Dude comes to pick it up a week and a half later. In a wheelchair, cause he broke one leg, sprained the other ankle, and sprained a wrist. He has been for 20 years my gold standard. Back in my baseball days, when I was pitching, I completely lost a pitch, and it beamed a guy in the jaw. He throws his bat down, glares at me with the glariest of glares ever glared, spits out blood, then calmly runs to first base as though nothing happened. It was terrifyingly badass. Wait, before you go, don't forget to like and subscribe, you sexy human.